I'm going to do cloud. There we go. Welcome. My name is Alexandra Schneider, and I'm the director of the Brooke County Public Libraries located in Wellsburg and Follansbee, which for those of you who may not be local are located in the northern panhandle of West Virginia. If you would not mind, and if you're joining us virtually, and at this time, I do believe we do not have anybody extra on here, take a second and enter where you're from and how many people may be attending with you. We also thank you for joining us during this difficult time. It's very hard to have programming at the library just due to various things. We're just brought in-house programming back and we're still growing it. But what's awesome about online virtual program is that we are having people join us from out of state. Which kind of allows us to broaden our horizons and learn a little bit more that we wouldn't have learned potentially from local sources. A few house rules before we get started. No recording or photography of any kind. A recording is in process as we speak and will be available via our YouTube page and eventually via the author's website as well. Please be respectful. Please share your thoughts, opinions, and even questions in the chat section. Feel free to even interact with each other that way. If you're experiencing glitching, audio quality issues, or anything of that nature, try turning your web camera off on your device. It will help you save bandwidth and normally clears up some of the issues. If you get kicked out, don't worry. I have the waiting room not enabled, so you should pop back in very quickly. If you're watching from a computer, consider hovering over our guest's box and pinning their video to the screen so that they are front and center if you have not done so already. For those on smart devices, they will end up being the main person you see since they will be the one speaking. However, with a swipe of your finger, either left or right, you will be able to toggle through the attendees to find our author's feed. We also ask you to bear with us. Every live event functions different, and each library has access to only certain functions of technology. Lastly, be respectful of our guests and the fellow patrons who are joining us during this presentation. Unacceptable behavior will not be tolerated, and you will be removed from the program automatically. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're hoping that the people here today will learn something, but then also the recording that we have in process will be something that people can watch in the future. So I ask you guys kind of do a round robin, introduce yourselves, and then you guys have the floor.
Sure. Thank you very much, Alexandra. And thank you, Brooke County Public Library, Wellsburg Library, for hosting this special event. And a special thank you to Alexandra Schneider for making this possible. We really appreciate being here. And a shout out to our parents who are also here as well. Very special shout out from the heart. So essentially, before we introduce ourselves, we just want you to look at this globe that we have rotating on the slide here. And imagine yourself speeding out from the Earth into this overview perspective. And they say the most powerful cognitive shift can happen when an astronaut turns back in spaceflight to view the Earth, that in that moment, all differences part, right? And we see this fragile planet that we all share. And this is what our book is about, is connecting this global mindset to global skill set. So patterns of communication that exist around the globe. And each chapter in the book pertains to a certain skill. The book is called How to Communicate Effectively with Anyone, Anywhere. And the first chapter pertains to public speaking, then we go to networking skills and all the way up to negotiation skills and then persuasive writing in the global marketplace. And the idea is that the skill set in the book in these 6 chapters comprises the skill set of the global communicator today. And so, we're going to talk today, we're going to give you a book talk, but based primarily on the first chapter, because that contains a lot of the framework for the strategies for becoming a global communicator in today's globalized business era. And as we know, there's a shift in focus in presentations from communication to connection, right? How do you connect with audiences? How do you establish relationships? And hopefully, in this global context, we can innovate together and collaborate towards world progress. So my name is Raúl Sánchez. I am a clinical assistant professor at New York University. In addition to being full-time at NYU, I also coordinate our corporate education program, which handles trainings between multinational corporations and NYU. Some companies that I've designed and delivered trainings for include Bloomberg, the United Nations, and Anheuser-Busch this summer recently, and also been published in Harvard Business Review and Fast Company and Quartz, to name a few. With these gentlemen here, I'm always privileged and happy to present with. And I'm going to turn it over to Professor Bullock.
So hey everybody, so it's nice to see everyone. So my name is Dan Bullock. I am a local native of Follansbee, West Virginia. So shout out to my hometown. And thank you again for having us. So I am also an NYU professor, where I teach within the corporate communications and public relations master's program in terms of public relations specifically. At the same time, I'm also a language and communication specialist and a trainer at the United Nations Secretariat here in New York City, where I train a number of diplomats, delegates, and global UN staff in terms of higher order communication skills. Now, what this means is it could range from presentations to negotiations, as we know, which are very important today. At the same time, I've also taught at Columbia University, the School of the New York Times. Believe it or not, there's a school at the School of the New York Times. And then I've also contributed to a number of different publications, as Professor Sanchez has mentioned. So Harvard Business Review, Quartz, Yahoo, and a few other ones that you might be familiar with as well. But that's a little bit about my background. I'm going to turn it over to Rod Sánchez.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Professor Bullock. Happy Veterans Day and welcome. I just want to extend a very warm thank you to Alexandra Schneider and the Brooke County Public Library for having us. It's a deep pleasure to celebrate the release of our book. As Professor Sanchez mentioned, How to Communicate Effectively with Anyone, Anywhere. And we're very excited and appreciative to you for joining us today for this very special book talk and workshop event. My name is Rod Sánchez. I am the illustrator of the book, and I'm honored to collaborate with these two gentlemen on this work. Gracious gentlemen, I should say, my twin brother, talented twin brother, Professor Raúl Sánchez, whom we heard from just now, and my insightful dear friend, Professor Dan Bullock as well. I'm a lead user experience designer at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, which is a global trade and educational publisher. And my experience extends in providing design direction and creating visual communication design solutions across multiple digital and print media platforms. I've also designed campaigns for such entities as Disney, Nickelodeon, Scholastic, Brooke College, and Penguin Random House. And as my twin brother mentioned, we'd like to spend a very special shout out to our parents, our families who are here visiting today. And we have a lot of exciting things planned for you, so we invite you to enjoy. Professor Sanchez, Professor Bullock, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you. And Dan is our honorary twin, everyone. So he's part of the trio, but this is my twin brother. So Professor Bullock, do you want to kick us off on the agenda?
Sure thing. So just a topical agenda. Where are we going on this journey through this interactive workshop? So we're going to talk about culturally powerful presentations. What are these and how do we make them culturally powerful? So how do we communicate with diverse audiences, mixed audiences as well? We're going to look at the characteristics of an effective presentation. So how do we give an effective presentation that makes people want to listen, right? The whole idea is keeping someone's attention. This is going to fold into the storytelling element. We all love stories, right? It's the basis to everything that we talk about. So we're going to talk a little bit about psychology, just a little bit, the science of neural impact. Okay. Then we're going to go into Maslow's motivational theory. Now, some of us might remember this from high school or maybe from middle school, something like that, or even university, but we're going to look at it as it relates to presentations, right? So what needs to be incorporated as we go up and down this pyramid? Next, we'll be looking at effective opening. So opening the presentation, these effective hooks. So there are patterns. Whenever we look at speeches, whenever we look at different ways that people communicate, there are patterns and there's ways to introduce specific content to get someone's attention. So that's what we're going to be giving you here as well. And part two, Professor Sanchez.
And part two, we're widening it to the global context. So we're going to talk about something called Schemata, which if you haven't heard of yet, you will know very soon what it is. This is also related to cognitive psychology, and it's a very powerful tool that you can use to ignite cognitive centers in your audience members' brains and minds. Then we're going to go into the larger cultural style patterns across the globe, which we talked about a little at the beginning, and then touch on some linguistic considerations for being a global communicator and developing an international presentation style. And then in the end, we have a special treat for you, one vision from the award-winning artist, my twin, Rod Sánchez, that we're excited to share with you. So stay tuned, and here we go. So we want to start with the word change. Every presentation is an opportunity to change the world, right? Every speaking situation is an opportunity for change. Whether we're presenting to a small group of coworkers and stakeholders in a boardroom or in a larger conference center, The goal of every presentation is to create a connection between the presenter and the audience that ignites some kind of change. We have a quote here from President Barack Obama: "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." But when we're starting with this concept of change, and this is just the framework, this is for the mindset, we are not the source of change. We are the catalyst of change. So does anyone know what a catalyst is? If you can type in the chat, and I can see who's here, so I know if you're paying attention. If you go back to your chemistry days from high school or from your reading, I know everybody here is very well read. What is a catalyst? If you can type in the chat for us. Good, I see a spark. Yeah, it tips the scales for something to happen. Yeah, very good, okay. So the catalyst speeds up the chemical reaction, right? So in the same way, we are a catalyst for change. The audience is the center, right? We are not the hero of the presentation. The audience is the hero. We are the guy on the side, and the marathon runner is running the race, and we are giving that water to the marathon runner, right? We are Yoda or Mr. Miyagi or the fairy godmother, okay? And the reason that we have this mindset shift is that once we see the audience as the center of the presentation, not ourselves, we're able to cultivate the adaptability that we need for intercultural communication to occur. We're able to create a space of empathy and respect and shared understanding. And it's always these three areas. You want to be a catalyst for thought, emotion, and action. So the goal is the audience leaves your presentation thinking differently, feeling differently, or doing something differently than they did when they entered. And if you can combine 2 or 3 of these in your message, your presentation is going to be even more impactful. But the audience is the hero. Everything that we do, even if we're telling a story about ourselves, is to arm them with the tools so they can take your thunderbolt and create change in the world. Okay. So we want you to think back to a presentation you saw that was effective, and just we'll give you a few seconds here to type in the characteristics that you noticed of that presentation. What made it so effective? Whether it was online or in person, what made that presentation particularly powerful for you? And we have some hidden here behind these 2 blocks, and we have a reason why we are doing this, but we just want to see what you come up with first before we reveal the ones that we have grouped here. So when you saw a presentation that was memorable, impactful, what sort of things were notable about that presentation? So using your voice, I see in the chat, right? The voice can be a powerful instrument. Visuals, right? Effective use of visuals. Okay, good. Yeah, professional looking. You can tell someone took the care to put themselves together and make a good impression. Maybe something called executive presence or just presence in general. And also taking care to prepare the stories, prepare the imagery, right, that accompanies the content. Very good. So we're going to reveal some here that we have as well, and some of the ones that you've already mentioned in the chat. So information research, and here we're thinking about making the research and examples relatable to global audiences, universally recognizable. The purpose is important, it's connected to the message. Visual aids, as you mentioned here, the type, design, clarity, relevance is very important. And organization and structure, right? Is there a logical flow? Is there a beginning, middle, and end? The message, this ties to what we mentioned in the earlier slide. The message is always, it touches on these 3 areas: action, feeling, or thought. And if you can combine 2 of these, you're going to have an even more powerful presentation. On the other side, we have nonverbals, so eye contact, body language, and voice, right? So the one key tip here is that when you shift your body movement, you should do that when you shift in topic. Okay, so when you signal a change in topic, you should shift your body. So for example, if I say today, we're going to talk about A, and then I'm going to cover 3 things in terms of A, 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to talk about B, and I'm going to cover 3 things. Now, if I delivered the same thing and I said, today we're going to talk about A, and I'm going to cover 3 things, and then we're going to talk about B, and I'm going to cover 3 things. You can see how different it is, right? Particularly when you're presenting to speakers of multiple languages, you want to make sure that your shifts in body movements mark shifts in content in the presentation, okay? In terms of voice, there's always three elements here: stress, which is volume; intonation, which is rise and fall; and rhythm, which is pacing. So this comes back to linguistics, which is one of our areas of specialization, and is very important to build that vocal variety and power. Passion, you have to be passionate about the topic. If you care about the topic, you will build that bridge so the audience can care as well. Transition signals, how do you mark passages in the presentation? These are signposts that you can build along the journey of your talk. And then also the use of the physical or virtual space. Are you using the PowerPoint? Are you using the breakout rooms? Are you using the chat? How can you maximize the interactivity? And we're going to talk about that in the second to last bullet. Technical level of talk. Is the audience a generalist audience? Then you use generalized terms. Or are they a specialized audience? And you're going to use more specialized terms. And the interactivity here, this is very important, not just for engagement, but when you are presenting to intercultural audiences, you want to make sure you build feedback loops. So interactivity allows you to build feedback loops to see, is the audience following you? How are they responding to the material? And then that way you can adjust accordingly, okay? So now we have this information in two blocks. So I want you to take a moment just to think about why we have it in these two blocks. And the reason is just displayed at the top of the slide. Every presentation is a combination of two things: content and delivery. To be effective, you have to have both of these pillars in mind. If one pillar falls, the other one falls with it, okay? So while all these ingredients are important, the idea is you have to focus on the content and the delivery. Sometimes we think the presentation is finished and we've done the PowerPoint. But in fact, we have to plan a whole other part of the presentation, which is the delivery. And research shows in cognitive psychology that memory is affected by how deeply we process information. So emotions embed memories more strongly. So when we're creating the architecture of presentation, we want to think not just about the content, but the delivery. And then Professor Bullock.
Sure. And just another way of saying this is what we say is as important as how we say it. So again, the content, right, is just as important as the delivery. So just making this come full circle in terms of you have to be able to use your voice effectively in order to give an impactful presentation. You have to get someone's attention, not just through the words, not just through the imagery, but also through the voice and the variations in your speech, okay?
Yeah, and so now we're going to go into a little bit of neuroscience, into a phenomenon called neural coupling, which you may or may not have heard of. This is very fascinating. So this is in the book as well. So a team of researchers at Princeton University, led by Dr. Yuri Hassan, they were researching the basis of human communication and storytelling. And what they found was quite remarkable. They found that when we are delivering a powerful story, we share nearly identical brainwave activity with the audience. And so this research affirms something we've known for quite some time, that storytelling is stories are one of the most powerful transcultural vehicles for communication that we have. Essentially what they did was they hooked up the brains of storytellers to MRI machines, and then the brains of audience members to MRI machines. And they found that our brain waves get in sync in the act of storytelling. So this is a tool that we can use in the globalized era very powerfully to communicate ideas. Storytelling synchronizes the listener and presenter's brain. It connects listeners to the storyteller emotionally. Also, stories light up more of the brain than factual reporting. So when you hear a list of bulleted facts, or even you read it, only the Broca's area and the Wernicke area are activated. These are the language processing areas. But when you hear a story, everything else is activated, almost as if you are in a sensory way experiencing that person's story in real time. So stories can be quite powerful that way. Also, they enhance memory, as we talked about. Emotions embed memories more strongly, and much more engaging. Think of Isaac Newton and the apple, right? We remember that much more than the particulars of gravity. So how do we do this in a presentation? How do we achieve this mind-to-mind connection? There's a few ways to do it, and these are in the book. We're going to summarize them here. The first is bonding with audiences over a professional, social, or personal cause. We all listen to stories with our hearts more than our minds, because we're looking for messages that align with our values. So see if there's a core value in your presentation and you can build a story around it. Maybe it's empathy or honesty or integrity, right? And then here, if you build your story around that value, then you can expand your stories from personal to human experience. The second is to illustrate a skill, process, or method important for growth. Stories that we mentioned before make things much easier to understand than just giving a list of steps. The third is stories can highlight how to overcome a shared challenge or overcome or achieve a common goal. So here you're thinking about powerful decision-making moments in your life, and then how can those stories help the audience make a similar decision in their lives, okay? And so again, here, the audience is the center. So even if you're telling a story about yourself, you're trying to empower the audience to become their best selves, right? The other way you can do this is to make a presentation bigger in meaning than its data. A story is a powerful way to communicate a data set. And there's an article, Professor Bullock always sends me very stimulating articles to read. He's a very intellectual and avid reader. And there was one title of an article I never forgot that he sent me. And it said, "Data without the human soul is meaningless." And this is very true, right? We give meaning to data. We give it future, we forecast, and we give it prediction and trends and so on. So if you can tell a story around your data, it's going to be much more powerfully presented, okay? And now we're going to go into Maslow's motivational theory, and Professor Bullock, I have turned over to you.
Sure thing. So yes, so now we understand how stories affect us, right? Now let's look at engaging global audiences through this pyramid structure, Maslow's motivational theory for presentations. Now, a question we just want you to be thinking about is, in what ways can a speaker hold the audience's attention? How do you get the audience's attention whenever you give a presentation? Or even think about it in conversation, right? Well, 4 things to really be thinking about. You must know your audience, number 1, right? And if you know your audience, you have to know what your purpose is. Are you informing? Are you trying to persuade someone? Are you entertaining someone? What are you doing, right? Both of those elements, audience and purpose, will inform your message, right? Whatever that message is, but you must make sure that you're adding some sort of value and giving the audience some sort of value to go off and do great things. That's the basis to what we're talking about here. So audience, purpose, message, and value, okay? In terms of these 5 levels, right, we use these to motivate our audience to want to learn more from our presentation. That's the goal here, right? So if we look at the very bottom, we have attention and curiosity. We have to activate curiosity. We'll talk more about that here in a moment. But this is the basic need in terms of a presentation. Why am I here? Why am I interested in this? So for example, we have to think, going back to this element of patterns, right? Whenever maybe I give a presentation, maybe I state a problem at the beginning, and then the audience is immediately probably going to think, well, what's the solution, right? So problem and solution tend to go together. If I state a cause of something, we naturally start to think, well, what's the effect, right? So there's specific patterns that we automatically think of whenever we hear presentations. And there's more that we talk about in the book, but that's the basic, the first tier is grabbing the attention, building curiosity, okay? The next phase is personal storytelling, right? Building this safety element, right? So creating a safe environment for sharing stories, right? Some of us might be familiar with Brene Brown. She's at the University of Texas. She talks a lot about vulnerability. Sometimes it might be making yourself a little vulnerable in order to get other people to share information. Now, we do this a lot, whether it's in trainings at the UN or corporate trainings, right? It's about using yourself as an example so that other people can share information. Okay. But the idea is you want to show the audience that you are in service to them. That's what's most important here. You are in service to the audience. Just like Professor Sanchez said, you are the fairy godmother, right? You are Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid. You are Yoda from Star Wars. You are there helping the audience achieve whatever it is that they're there to achieve. Okay. We also want to be mindful of building community. Now, specifically from intercultural communications, right? There are two areas to be aware of. There's high context cultures and there's low context cultures. Now, what this means is that high context cultures, think of it this way, about 70% of the world operates in this way, right? To where there's a lot of indirect communication. Whereas low context cultures tend to operate more in a more direct or linear format, the US being an example of that. We'll get into that here more in a future slide. But the idea is we want to build community, right? So building community is going back to these feedback loops that Professor Sanchez mentioned. Chunking information. Now, what we mean by this is not giving long-winded sentences in your presentation, but small pieces of information so people can digest it. You want to connect the dots, right? That's essentially what you're doing from one topic to the next. Also, something else that we talk about in the book is global English. Now, if you're not familiar with what this is, global English has to do with using something called plain language. not using idioms, not using expressions that other people might not know in different cultures, right? But the idea is we're building teams here. We are building relationships through story is the goal, to create this community. At the same time, we're trying to build gratitude here. So serving as a catalyst of thought, emotions, or action, like Professor Sanchez said at the beginning, we're giving value and recognition to audiences. So they're there, we're encouraging them, we're motivating them along the way. The idea is going back to this idea of service, right? So service is the act of giving back the gift of ideas given to you in global context. And think about it this way: sharing an idea with others is the greatest expression that we can do essentially as a presenter, okay? Last but not least is this call to action, right? So at the very top of this pyramid is we are trying to motivate, or we are trying to challenge our audiences to maybe think differently, feel differently, have a different impression of the story. The idea is that we are including with the audience. We're doing it together. We're a team, right? We're a team. But the idea is we're a team in terms of this cognitive space, right? So like if we're sharing stories and we're connected through stories, then we're collaborating at the same time. Some of us might be familiar with Tony Robbins, if you've heard of Tony Robbins, a very good motivational speaker. What he tends to do is he has his audiences, if you go to any of his events, he has them walk on hot coals, right? Hot, fiery coals. The idea is to challenge someone's fear of something, right? Now we're not going to have you walk on coals, thankfully, right? But the idea is we want to come to a point where we are helping the audience reach this self-actualization, where they're able to do things themselves, giving them the confidence to do that. Okay, Professor Sanchez. I think
I was muted. Yes, that's exactly the one of the most powerful points there is that at the top of the pyramid, humanity's highest need is self-actualization. But what we're thinking about is not our own self-actualization, right? We're not on the stage to be our best selves. We always think that, but that's not traditionally is what we think, but that's not the case. We're there to help the audience become their best selves. So again, it's a mindset shift that everything we do is so the audience can go out and create that change in the world. Okay. And so now neuroscience has mapped out how to start an effective presentation. So can anyone tell us what dopamine is? And again, I know, and I see Alex nodding, so I know that you're familiar with this term. What is dopamine? Can anyone type that in the chat for us? So what is dopamine? So I'll give you a moment. I think I hear some clicking. Yeah, exactly. Very good. So so the chemicals in our brain, right? This is the happy hormone, the happy chemical, right? So dopamine is our brain's chemical reward for curiosity, okay? Now, what is interesting about this, and this is something that was researched at University of California, Berkeley, and also in the book, is that we receive a natural high when we are receiving when we are in a state of curiosity, but it isn't when we get the reward, which is information. We receive this pleasure chemical when we are anticipating the reward. So the focus is that you want to keep building hooks throughout each section of the presentation, not just at the beginning, so you can stimulate that audience curiosity throughout. Okay, but we receive dopamine not just when we're receiving the reward, which is information, but the anticipation. So a state of curiosity is actually what makes us happy, not receiving the answer, right? And we're going to give you some expert hooks here, and then we're going to do a little exercise with you. So we just ask you to pay attention. There's going to be a little game on the next slide. And then the first hook here is an interesting observation. So what if I were to tell you American economists aren't sleeping well these days? Would you be concerned? See Alex smiling. You might think, do I have to change my investment strategy? What do I have to do? Okay, so the idea of observation hook can be very powerful. And to create this hook, the technique is you're pointing out a pattern, some irregularity, some discovery, or a warning. Okay, this is how you can start a presentation with the observation hook. There's some hint at a compelling future outcome. This also works for writing as well. So if you are writing an article or any other piece, to create this observation hook, again, you're pointing out a warning, a discovery, an irregularity, or some hint at a compelling future outcome. And this can work very well. Professor Bullock.
Okay, so going into the second one. Okay, so the second one is obviously a story or a unique scenario. So take this example, right? So what if I said, what if I'm beginning a presentation? I say, this afternoon, when I reached for my credit card to give to the clerk, I hesitated. Identity theft is one of the fastest growing crimes today, right? Notice how I didn't start with identity theft. I started with an initial sentence, but I'm getting everyone able to relate to this, right? We all use credit cards, or we know somebody who perhaps might use credit cards. If we don't own one ourselves, if we don't know anyone that owns one, then maybe we've seen a commercial, something like that. But the idea is we're trying to get people to think back and relate to the content itself. Good. And the third one?
And the third is a question. So what if I were to ask you, can you imagine the world without a single tree? Okay, so this creates story, right? If I had said, we're going to talk about forest degradation due to urbanization or climate change, may not have been as compelling, okay? But can you imagine the world without a single tree? This creates story, right? It creates imagery in your mind. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. I was training a group of HR professionals in presentation skills. And so I said, you can present on any topic for their first presentation. And we went through these techniques. So I was sitting in the audience, and one of them, Audrey was presenting. And she said, can you think of the person that you miss the most? So we did. And she said, close your eyes and think of that person. So I was thinking of my mother. I know other people in the audience were thinking of their father, their grandmother, their brother, their sister, their uncle. And then she started to play some music. And then she said, now open your eyes. And on that first slide, she had a road, and the road was diverging in two directions. And she said, today, I'm going to talk to you about loss and how important it is to appreciate those that we have while they're with us on the planet. And we were just, our hearts were, in her hands, we were, almost crying. We were feeling that presentation, and she connected us right away. Now, the beauty of this hook, and the reason I tell the story, is that when you give this type of hook, you don't have to get the answers from the audience, right? As soon as you ask the question, they will connect themselves to your presentation in their own minds and hearts, right? You don't have to elicit responses. This can be a very powerful hook of the question, okay? And to create this hook, there's two ways. You can ask a yes, no question or a show of hands question to get the audience to ask, so what? Or you can ask an open-ended question and implying that there's a predetermined answer in the presentation, okay? And then Professor Bullock.
Sure. And then the fourth one we have here, and keep in mind, anytime you watch a TED Talk, right, more than likely they're using one of these or a combination of these, okay? An amazing fact. I love this one because facts are important, right? For example, what if I said this? Lung cancer kills 170,000 people in 1 year, right? More than all criminal and accidental deaths combined, right? So again, we hear lots of these statistics, right? But what we're doing is we're taking the initial fact and we're combining it, or we're comparing it to something else that's just as important, criminal and accidental deaths. Now, what if I said this to you? What if I give you another fact? And what if I say, for example, here we go. What if I said, the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west? Is that interesting? Okay, I see some faces. Everyone's like, no, it's not, Dan. Well, it isn't, right? Because it's obvious. It's been doing that for a long time, and it will probably continue to do that for a long time in the same pattern, right? But the idea is it needs to be amazing. It needs to be something that people are not readily familiar with, okay? And then we have one more here, Professor Sanchez.
Sure, and this is the last one. We're just putting it here for completion's sake, a quote. We put a sample when a business that makes nothing but money is a poor business. However, we don't recommend this method, okay? Because starting with someone else's words, then that means you have to waste time connecting their quote to your presentation, contextualizing it. And then the most valuable juncture of the presentation is the beginning. So instead, it's recommended to start with your own originality and then use the quote to support that, right? Otherwise, you have to contextualize the quote and you spend a lot of time connecting someone's words for another context to your presentation, okay? So overall, this is how you achieve the dopamine effect. And we want to do a little exercise with you with these hooks. But first, we're going to contrast two hooks here to illustrate one last point. Professor Bullock.
Sure. So for example, what if our presentation started out something like this? I hear many presentations that begin something like this. Engaging in environmental sustainability will help us to reduce the causes of global warming. We know right now the UN COP26 is taking place in Glasgow, Scotland. I'm sure some of these presentations perhaps might be beginning like this, right? But if we compare this to another way of presenting the information, Professor Sanchez?
Sure. If global temperatures continue to rise, New York and Mumbai will be underwater by the year 2050. Okay. So here, comparing the two, the second one might be more compelling. Okay. Now notice that we didn't use the phrases environmental sustainability or global warming. The hook is not the same as the main idea, right? The hook is not the purpose statement or the thesis statement. The hook is just the beginning of the story. You open the theme and then you connect to your message, your purpose statement, your thesis. Okay. So now we're going to play a little game. We're going to show you some hooks from renowned speeches around the world and online, and we want you to identify the technique that was used. And the one thing we want to illustrate as well is that if you combine techniques, your hook is even more powerful. So if you use two techniques in one, your hook is even more resonant. And so some of these have two answers, okay? So did you know the field of psychology is simply the brain trying to comprehend itself? So which two techniques would be here in this hook?
You see the techniques listed at the top, right? So out of those four that we just discussed, not the quote, but the four at the very top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing fact and a question. Exactly, very good. Yeah.
Good. And the next one. So imagine a big explosion as you climb through 3,000 feet. Imagine a plane full of smoke. Imagine an engine going clack, clack, clack. I know it sounds scary. Well, I had a unique seat that day. I was sitting in seat 1D. So what element is being used here? Which one of those hook techniques? Story for sure. You got it, right? And this was a story that it was actually the airplane that left from LaGuardia Airport here in New York and had to make the emergency landing in the Hudson River. This was a person who was on that airplane sharing their story, but it engages you. It brings you into the story. Good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called 3 Things I Learned While My Plane Crashed. It's powerful talk. Okay, so even if they've never been able to see it themselves, blind people smile when they're happy. Smiling is a basic human instinct. This is one of my favorite, well, I don't want to give away the answer, but this is one of my favorite nuggets here. So even if they've never been able to see it themselves, blind people smile when they're happy. So this is 2. What do you think? Yeah, very good. You get virtual chocolate for county public libraries. Yes, observation and a fact. Fantastic. Okay, Professor Bullock.
Good. So sadly, in the next 18 minutes during this chat, 4 Americans that are alive will be dead from the food that they eat, right? So most of us are thinking this, right? Most likely an observation or fact too, right? In some essence, okay?
And the last one, 49% of social media users share product information with the hopes of improving the lives of others. What do you think? We see the percentage there. Yeah, yep. Fact. Right? Okay, very good. And so now we're going to go into another area of presentations called schemata. And this comes from cognitive psychology. This is from cognitive psychologist Jean Piaget. And so a schemata is basically a blueprint for interpreting and understanding information. So to illustrate this concept very quickly, I'm just going to ask Alex and Dan and Rod to answer a question very quickly. So if I were to tell you I bought a chair, that's the only thing I told you. Raúl bought a chair. Okay.
Is it comfy?
I hope so. And Alex, what kind of chair did you picture in your mind? Can you tell us the color and the makeup?
The one I'm sitting in right now. It's black and it was made for big and tall, so it's nice and comfy for me.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I might have to see a picture of it later then to get that. Mine is, well, I'll tell you what mine looks like in a moment, but very different. And then Rod, what did you picture? What chair did you picture?
Pictured a black leather chair, comfortable, with very just a plush black chair. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And then Dan, Professor Bullock, what did you picture?
Whatever happened to the lawn chair, sitting outside, with a lawn chair in the yard? Come on.
How about a beach chair? Okay, so
chair,
you've got it. Okay, this is the wonder of communication, right? I said I bought a chair. Everyone understood chair because you all have the schemata for chair in your mind, right? You have a blueprint for chair in your mind, but I didn't give you any details, so you filled in the details with perhaps something based on your cultural experiences, your own personal experience. So to activate schemata for global audiences, the main tip is that you want to present information through more than one sense, right? You want the audience to see the information on the slide, to hear it a different way, to experience it through sensory multimedia or storytelling. And this is very important for intercultural audiences. So for example, I'm giving a presentation called Entrepreneurship in the Age of Globalization. The word entrepreneurship is not translatable across cultures readily, but if I have a picture of Steve Jobs and Amancio Ortega on the slide, as global professionals walk in the room, then their schemata is activated. They're able to access prior knowledge and experiences and be primed to connect it to new information that you are giving, and also access vocabulary as well, okay? And we have a special treat to illustrate this concept. We've applied it in the book, and award-winning artist Rod Sánchez, lead UX experience designer, is going to show this to us and explain this unique augmented reality component of the book.
Thank you, Professor Sánchez, Professor Bullock, for that kind introduction. So we have an exciting new feature in the book that utilizes augmented reality, as we can see here. We created this feature together as a team, and our intention with utilizing this emerging technology is to design a new immersive reading and learning experience in support of the rich content in the book, and for readers to feel more closely connected with the content in a multisensory way. So how does it work? The book holds a number of key skills and communication concepts that are illustrated within each of the 6 chapters on the topics of public speaking, networking, and negotiation, on how to become an effective global communicator. And so we designed these key illustrations in the book in augmented reality. And what this means is that you can interact with the illustrations by simply hovering your smartphone over the page, and the illustrations come to life through your smartphone with animation and sound and spoken instruction. And from a pedagogical perspective, we're calling these augmented reality experiences short micro-learning moments, moments to reveal and demonstrate key business communication concepts, practical tips, and actionable insights in the digital layer to the physical book. And Professor Bullock, if you could please cue up the demo video so we can share how it all works. It's excellent. So in this example, what we're going to be demoing is a concept in chapter 4, the power of nonverbal communication. And here we're utilizing motion to convey the significance of body movements as a pattern of communication. So the concept here that showcases the 3 zones of professional communication. And in this case, we're activating zone 1's personal zone. We're illustrating one-on-one interactions in motion. Here, we're sharing visual statistics regarding, these close interactions, and a tip, as we just saw, on enhancing global relationships. So in terms of animation, we're utilizing this medium as a vehicle of storytelling. And the great thing about this medium is that the user can activate this new reading experience from anywhere in the world, whether you're traveling on a train, at a coffee shop, or at home, or even if you're wearing a mask, which hopefully we won't need to wear much longer in the near future, you can still enjoy this, this very personal and visceral experience. So the 3-step process of how this works to activate the augmented reality experience is in the book is through your smartphone. So the technology that's utilized is an app, as it's indicated here, Professor Bullock indicated, is called Artivive. And you can download in step 1 this free app from the Apple Store or Google Play. In step 2, the experience begins in finding these 7 illustrations in the book. So the book cover being the first one, being an augmented reality, and then 1 illustration within each of the 6 chapters. Step 3, readers can experience the augmented reality concepts by simply hovering your iOS device, that'd be your smartphone or your iPad, over the artwork. So ultimately, our goal with utilizing this emerging technology is a point of departure to empower global audiences to learn, experience, and more deeply connect with the content in unique and meaningful ways. So Professor Sánchez, Professor Bullock.
Thank you, Rod.
Sure thing.
Oh, isn't that cool? I think that's super cool. So literally, and Rod spearheaded this innovative aspect of the book. You point your smartphone at the page, the illustration comes to life. You can workshop your voice, build more authority in your vocal performance when you're giving a presentation. So it's very cool. We invite you to check it out. And Rod's beautiful artwork comes to life on the page as well. And maybe we'll, Rod, if you don't mind putting in the chat the app that users, or we can share that with you on the website as well. So we want to start with this. So as we're nearing the close here, we want to start with this photograph. This is one of the most influential photographs ever taken. And this was taken by astronauts of the Apollo 8 mission. William Anders, the astronaut who took this picture, he said, "We set out to explore the moon, but instead we discovered the Earth." And this picture was, it went viral, as close to viral as an image could at the time. It was flooded by international media across the planet. And it is said that this image was so powerful, it helped launch the environmental movement. And the reason is because it brought to our eyes and our minds on Earth the overview effect, right? It was the first time we'd seen the fragility of our world, the loneliness of our world, just hanging there in space. And so the key is that we want to also arrive at this singular state of awareness when we are developing global communication skills and arriving at the skill set of a global communicator. And so we're going to talk to you about now is these patterns of communication. And this research is based on work from linguist Richard Lewis and intercultural researcher Edward T. Hall. And so these are larger communication style patterns across the globe. And the idea is you want to integrate these into one international presentation style, one singular presentation approach, okay? And so we're going to go through each of these. And Professor Bullock?
Sure thing. Okay, so we have the first one. This is the linear expressive style pattern. So think of things in terms of being very direct, right? So this pattern, right, tends to be very task oriented, very much about the task, very direct. It's very logically sequenced. The presentation goal here is to give information to an audience, okay? Here's some tips that we have is we want to correlate our words with our actions, right? We want to focus on the facts, hence, I guess why I emphasize amazing facts, right? But we also want to provide logical solutions, right? Because this type of pattern is used by different cultures in the world, but also diverse groups that we might work with regularly in different teams, right? In parts of the world, Professor Sanchez?
Sure, and this is the style pattern preferred by almost 30% of the world. So most English-speaking parts of the world, including Northwestern, North Central Europe, the United States, of course, Australia, New Zealand, and Scandinavia, okay? And the next style pattern here is what is called multi-expressive. If you haven't guessed, with my dramatic hand gestures and movements, this tends to be my style pattern of preference, okay? This style pattern tends to be people-oriented and expressive. The goal of presentations and communication is personal connection and opinion. So to integrate this style pattern into your presentation style, you want to create a space for empathy, focus on feelings, and provide inspirational and creative solutions. And Professor Bullock?
Good. So this is almost or nearly about 70% of the world, a little bit less, but this includes a large majority of Latin America, right? Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, North Africa, parts of Asia, as well as Indonesia as well, where there's a lot of expression built into the cultures, right? So naturally that makes sense that presentation should also be just as expressive as we see here, this personal connection and a focus on opinion. And then we have the third one right here. We have the amicable expressive style. So out of the three, right? This one is more indirect, right? More respect oriented. So there are some cultures in the world, or global teams perhaps we might work on, or people that we just communicate with from different cultures. The presentation goal is harmony, building harmony. Now, the tip that we have here is to preserve respect, right? And social harmony, right? In specific cultures, honor and loyalty become very, very important. But the idea is we want to provide gradualist solutions. So not give everything at the immediate upfront. We want to slowly compound information throughout our presentation. And Professor Sanchez?
Sure, and this style pattern is often preferred by most Asian countries, except for the subcontinent of India, which is both multi-expressive and amicable expressive. So one thing we want to point out here is that, again, we're not thinking of one set of strategies to target one particular audience, audience segment, that we're going to China and we're going to use this presentation style in China or in Germany or in India. The idea is that we're in a globalized era, and so we have mixed audiences in every presentation space. So we want to integrate all three of these patterns into one singular approach. And the way to do this actually comes from Aristotle, who was a very intelligent man. He was one of the most famous rhetoricians that ever lived. And so he coined these three appeals: logos, appeal to logic; pathos, appeal to emotion; and ethos, appeal to credibility. If you can integrate all three aspects in every single presentation that you give, you can see how neatly these correlate with the larger communication style patterns in the globe. So in terms of logic, you include statistics, facts, relevant research; pathos, emotionally impactful stories, compelling opinions, sensory media; and then ethos, relevant information about your character, your credibility, your track record. And the great thing about this approach is that it also accommodates not just cultural diversity, but individual diversity as well. For example, accountants could be linear expressive, and a publicist might be multi-expressive, and a doctor could be amicable expressive. So if you integrate all three of these aspects into every presentation, you're guaranteed to reach a wide spectrum of audiences, okay? And so now we're going to go to something called Global English briefly, and then Professor Bullock, did you want to kick this one off?
Sure, yeah. So global English, something we mentioned earlier on in the session, this refers to English usage that a professional speaker or writer, right, it works in both contexts, has optimized for a global audience. But the idea is this is the international business communication standard, right? English is the language that people communicate in across the world, right? But there's different variations. There's not just one type of English. There's many different types of English, okay? But we might want to think about it this way. What is global English? It's clear and concise usage that does not assume native fluency of others, right? So the idea, the expressions or follow the yellow brick road, for example, might not translate across cultures. But we want to think about it in the contrary aspect. Professor Sanchez?
Sure, because sometimes it's easier to define global English by what is not global English. And this is something at the United Nations, everyone speaks different languages, and English is the common language that is very important. So global English, so what is not global English? Idioms, right? So idioms are those phrases or groups of words that have a different meaning culturally from the individual parts, like cut and dry, off the top of my head, come up for air, no strings attached. International audiences, these aren't always easily translatable, and so we want to avoid them and use a more literal expression instead. Cultural references. So Americans love references to baseball, right? Let's level the playing field. This came out of left field. Let's bring our A game. So if you're using a cultural reference, make sure that it's universally recognizable across the globe. Initialisms and acronyms. These are abbreviations. So initialisms are essentially where you pronounce every letter, like FBI. Acronyms where a word is formed from the abbreviation, like NATO, right? Instead of North American Treaty Organization. Businessisms, this is corporate jargon, like let's put out some feelers. This has lots of moving parts. Let's take it to the next level. These can also be quite challenging, and instead it's recommended to use a more literal and clear expression. Phrasal verbs is an area that's very important. These are 2 to 3 word verbs that function as a singular verb, something like draw up or get ahead or zero in on. So instead in our trainings, we say, instead of draw up the contract, say write the contract or draft the contract. Use a single verb instead. And then sarcasm, of course, saying the opposite of what you mean can be quite challenging to intercultural audiences. If you say, beautiful day, isn't it? And it's raining outside, or that's just what we need, and it's the opposite, this can be very challenging. So instead, we promote the language of empathy using pronouns such as we and us to build shared goals and inclusion, so we can build global collaboration together. And then we have a very special treat in our last slide here. We want to share from the award-winning artist himself, Rod Sánchez, his beautiful painting, One Vision, which encapsulates the message of the book. And Rod Sánchez.
Thank you, Professor Sanchez, or Professor Raúl Sánchez, I should say, and Professor Bullock for asking me to share this piece. It is an honor for me to share this painting with all of you here. This piece is inspired by conversations between the three of us with regard to our world. And this painting is titled One Vision. It's a 36 inches by 24 inches on canvas. The piece celebrates global unity among nations, and all of us are unique human beings, yet we all share vital commonalities. We all share a universal heartbeat. We all share the air we breathe. We all share the capacity to love and to be loved. And this painting depicts our interconnectedness and the belief that together we can sculpt a better world. And with our uniqueness, we can find understanding. And so one of the questions thought about while creating this piece is, can we visualize a world with no boundaries in order to find understanding, trust, or the imagination? And this piece strives to communicate that our human connection is the nexus of healing change for our world. From the joining of hands and one shared human perspective to the hopeful tears of dolphins that flow from the tear duct of our visionary ocean, which we see here. And here we can translate, with the belief is that we can translate vision into action. So painting for me is like playing with the instruments of colors to allow for a symphony of emotion to emerge. And in support of what Professor Sanchez and Professor Bullock have shared as presenters, I feel like we're like conductors of an orchestra. So we just imagine this for a moment. As presenters, we're like conductors of an orchestra, guiding teams of musicians by believing in a vision. And when we believe in a shared vision, with the integrity of our actions, the honesty of our movements, and the unspoken understanding of human connection, we're able to synchronize the tempo of our universal heartbeat. And so it is together that we can create a universal, or create a rising crescendo towards a shared vision of a beautiful universal harmony. So we as human beings believe that we are given a gift of being able to see each other from within and create connections in between. So thank you so much, Professor Sanchez, Professor Bullock, for allowing me to share this piece.
Sure. And this piece was published by the United Nations Academic Impact magazine. And so it's a very beautiful and powerful piece. And it's something that, seeing it here in the apartment, it's just, if you saw it in person, it's quite striking. And this really encapsulates the message of the book, that we are shapers of a better future when we work together. And we are giving away giving a gift to you, this print. If you purchase the book, please do send us an email. You have our emails here. Contact us through the website, which is www.globallycommunicate.com. And the website has the information about the augmented reality component. There's select illustrations in the book that come to life on the page. That information is on the website. There's also a quiz that you can take if you want to see what cultural presentation style that you're most attuned to, and then how you can integrate the other styles into your style preference. There's a cultural communication style quiz. And of course, the book tour, we're still doing the virtual book tour and offering free workshops in different aspects of the book: negotiation, networking, effective emailing, and then of course, presentation skills. We'd love to see you on the virtual road as well. So thank you again, Brooke County Library, Wellsburg Library, and Alexandra Schneider. We really appreciate you hosting us. And again, if you want to receive the painting, we'll send you a personalized signed print for free. If you purchase the book, you just have to let us know your shipping address and a book plate signed by all three of us as well. And then
what we can maybe do, Professor Sanchez, so maybe we can send the library 3 free copies of the book, right?
Of course.
We just purchased 2 of yours.
You did?
Okay.
We already have, they're on the shelves.
Okay, perfect.
Excellent.
Perfect.
You are awesome. You guys are awesome. Well, if you're interested in giving them away to anyone or anyone in need, or if there's any programs, we're happy to donate some copies as well. So
That'd be
just
perfect.
let us know. Yeah. Or Christmas gifts if you want to. Give them away. But yes, the website has all the information. And again, thank you so much for hosting.
Thank you again.
Thank you everyone for being here.
Alexander. Thank you so much, Alexander. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And you said that link is where people that watch this recording afterwards can find your book, purchase it, and all of the information that they might need with the augmented reality links and everything you discussed.
Absolutely. Yeah. globallycommunicate.com, and everything is there. Yeah. The AR, the book tour, and then information about upcoming things. And we have some surprises coming up. So if you do get the print, there'll be a treat hidden in that print that you'll find out later on next year.
NFTs are popular today, right?
Yeah, that's right. Sounds good.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording at this moment.